More twists in Pecco Bagnaia's season and a big weekend for Alex Marquez, but MotoGP's Malaysian Grand Prix has been overshadowed by a really horrible accident ahead of the Moto3 race involving champion Jose Antonio Rueda and Noah Dettwiler. This is the Race MotoGP podcast. It's just me, Matt Beer, and Simon Patterson for this one. Simon, let's go straight into what we know about what happened in Moto3.
So we from what we know, and we have a fairly good idea actually, because I spoke after the race finally ran and finished with Angel Piqueras, who was right behind the incident. It seems like Noah Dettwiler on the CIP moto bike had a technical problem. He's been slowing and trying to get off the racing line, trying to get over to the left-hand side of the track, and championship leader Jose Antonio Rueda has come through. Piqueras said he had his hand out, waving, trying to slow down the guys behind him, but Rueda didn't see him and struck the back of Dettwiler's bike, and the two of them went down together in a big smash, a very high speed. You know, this is we've said it before. I think that the biggest issue here is the biggest issue always whenever you have two bikes colliding is speed differential,
Yes,
and we had a big speed differential in this one, and Jose Antonio has broken his hand or his wrist, kind of mixed reports, but I think he's broken some things in his hand. He's badly bruised and he has a quite severe concussion. So he's in hospital in Kuala Lumpur, undergoing medical assessment for that. Noah Dettwiler is more serious, but the team have just issued quite a brief statement saying that, just asking people to respect his privacy at the time while he undergoes multiple surgeries, to see what his condition is going to be once they get him stabilised.
Yeah, horrible situation. There have been reports about Dettwiler's condition. We'll go with what the team's asked and not delve into any of the information that's been released at this point, and respect the family's privacy, beyond just saying, obviously, absolutely best wishes and all our thoughts with everyone around Dettwiler and Rueda as well. I mean, what after the season Rueda has had as well, such a fantastic run to the championship, you'd assume from those injuries that is season over. What a horrible way for it to end for him.
It mirrors Marc Marquez's, doesn't it?
Yeah.
An absolutely incredible season, the title wrapped up, and then something relatively innocuous has left him quite badly hurt and looking at sitting out maybe the rest of the year. Yeah, not nice. Not a nice way to end this flyaway block. Not a nice way. You know, everyone's been away from home for 5 weeks. Everyone in the paddock is already kind of worn out. So not a nice way to come out of that. And not a nice way to go racing whenever the racing finally started. And there was quite a few very heated comments from riders tonight about that. When I spoke to Piqueras, the kid had just finished in the podium in a Moto3 race and just didn't want to be there. It's exactly the same when I spoke to Barry Baltus after the Moto2 race. And then the MotoGP riders, Pecco Bagnaia wouldn't let us talk about his race until he had talked about the Moto3 race, because he felt like it needed to be said that these guys are kids, and that we watched them. We made them sit in pit lane in baking hot sun for 2 hours in their leathers, watching two of their mates get helicoptered out of the circuit, not knowing what condition they were in, and then sent them out to race for our entertainment. Bagnaia was really upset about it. Bezzecchi was really upset about it. Franco Morbidelli basically refused to talk about his race in his media debrief and only wanted to talk about this to try and make the point. Alex Rins has been posting on social media about it. There's a very broad paddock consensus that it at least wasn't the right thing to do to immediately send Moto3 back out to race today, and that this wasn't handled very well, which is not something that we've, this is something we've discussed before, isn't it? You remember Pecco Bagnaia's crash on the first lap of the Italian Grand Prix after a minute's silence for Jason DePasquier, who tragically died the day before. This is something that these people have talked about before, and it's a very odd feeling in the paddock tonight.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. It's always a very difficult situation in terms of what information is publicised, what decisions are made about whether to go out again, which series to go out again. Everyone involved in this knows that serious and the most serious accidents can happen in motorcycle racing. As soon as they start doing that as kids, as soon as their families and teams get involved, they know this could be something they encounter in their professional and sporting lives. And they've always got that somewhere in their minds. That doesn't mean they're immune to thinking about it and they're immune to being affected by it. And I'm not at all surprised that Bagnaia, who was so affected on the weekend of Justin Pasquier's desk in particular, I'm not surprised that he was the one raising the big questions over the timing of Moto3 racing, because while I've got some sympathy for the dilemmas the organisers face when riders' conditions are uncertain, with the age of the riders and the fact it was one of them, two of them, seriously hurt in this accident. For Moto3 to be the series that goes out straight afterwards, well, there's no information available apart from presumably a lot of whispers in the paddock.
Whenever we were already rewording the schedule anyway, reworking the schedule to put Moto2 after MotoGP, just run the Moto2 race at least. Get Moto2 done, get MotoGP run, and then run the Moto3 race at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I'm very much on board with that suggestion. But like we say, main thing today is all our thoughts with Noah Dettwiler and his family, and same with Jose Antonio Rueda. Let's talk about what happened in MotoGP when it did get going. Another really weird one for Pecco Bagnaia, but this time it was a different flavour of weird. It wasn't Pecco, why are you last weird? It was Pecco, why are you suddenly dominating again weird? He doesn't actually win the Grand Prix on this occasion. It doesn't look like he's going to either. Having been passed by Alex Marquez, battling Pedro Acosta, suffers a puncture that takes him out of the race. But until then, having been in Q1 on Friday, brilliant effort to come through Q1, take pole in Q2 with just one run, and then just controls the sprint race very impressively. Naturally, Simon, plenty of questions from the Race Members Club about this. JD and Laura are among those asking if it's the big brakes being fitted again. Is this have they found a mechanical difference? But lots of other people just going, is this in his head? The way Stuart Coulter puts it is, I've always considered Maverick Vinales to be MotoGP's greatest enigma, but it feels like Pecco Bagnaia is on course to usurp him. The constant yo-yo between front run and also ran this season leaves me perplexed. Frank Quinn does that more bluntly and says he's turning into Maverick. So what is your theory for why Pecco was back as proper Pecco this weekend?
I think if people would be a lot less skeptical about this weekend if Motegi hadn't happened.
Okay.
And I think Pecco Bagnaia would be a lot less confused if Motegi hadn't happened. We talked about this at the end of the day today. He still doesn't understand what happened in Motegi. He still doesn't understand why he was so fast. And it has confused the solution to get to where they're at now. But he insisted afterwards that this basically is the culmination of a new direction of work that they first felt success from in the Sunday race in Phillip Island, the last time out, where he was relatively competitive in terms of lap times. He was just starting from basically last and couldn't make progress and then fell off. So he felt like they'd made a step there. He then felt like they made another step on Friday, and he ended Friday looking pretty quick. He started Friday looking pretty quick, and then didn't go through to Q2 directly. But it was close. He was like in the mix.
He was happy enough as well, wasn't he? He wasn't like in despondent, confused mode. He was like, I actually could have done this, but I didn't get the lap together.
The end of Q2 of the end of practice on Friday was that weird wet session where it rained with 10 minutes to go, and then it was dry, and so it confused things a bit. And I think he should have went to Q2, but he felt like they'd found something that would have led him. He went out in Q1 and they did a little bit of work on the bike, and it worked, and it let him go through to Q2 pretty easily. They did a little bit of more. They obviously had a direction they wanted to go in, and they were gradually going in it. So they did a bit more of it. In Q2, he got pole position. He started the sprint. He looked super strong. He dominated the sprint in a way that Pecco Bagnaia doesn't regularly do, even whenever he's Pecco Bagnaia, not the weird guy who looks like Pecco Bagnaia that's been riding his bike recently. So it's kind of logical progress rather than the turn up, get in the bike and don't understand why the bike is amazing for one weekend only, like it was in Motegi. And I think he then went out in the race on Sunday, had a decent start, insisted fairly strongly afterwards that he could have fought for the win, that he was kind of letting Alex Marquez hang a little bit at the front because Bagnaia was the only guy in like the top 8 that was in the medium front, so a harder front tire, and felt like he'd be able to push a little bit towards the end of the race, have something on Alex Marquez, or at very least be comfortably second. Which as we've said all along, whenever I wasn't buying the whole Marc Marquez being his teammate has destroyed Pecco Bagnaia thing, Pecco being P2 at Sepang to Alex Marquez, given Alex Marquez's love of Sepang and in the absence of Marc, it's exactly where you'd have expected him to be in a normal season. So
a normal season where Alex has started as well as he has,
in a
and
normal
has
season
this
where Alex
very
has been,
sorted bike.
I think even in a normal season where Alex is having like the kind of year-old Ducati performances that everyone has had over the last few years. It's like DJ at Qatar. You wouldn't be surprised if Pecco would finish second to DJ Qatar on a year-old bike. It's kind of that level of Bezzecchi in Argentina or India and a year-old Ducati. That kind of level. So I think up until the point where 12 laps in, where suddenly he realised that he had a puncture in the rear tyre, I think it was looking like a weekend where, it's the first time. I mean, it's the first time this season where we've seen him find a bit of form at one race and carry it forward to another.
Yeah, you had to look pretty hard for the Phillip Island form, admittedly, because it was...
Yes, but the base was the starting point was so low.
Yeah.
That actually what he saw was a step, even if it wasn't last to first. But I mean, he did go from last to first over the course of a week.
Yeah, because the sprint performance at Phillip Island was so terrible. Yeah,
exactly. So there, it looks finally like there's a kind of a path here. Like there's something that they found that's bringing them in the right direction. Of course, we don't know for sure. Of course, we have to go to Portimao and see what happens there and what he turns up with there. But this is not the everything is fixed. Everything is wonderful. I can't believe I've got my old bike back, Bagnaia that finished Sunday night in Motegi. This is a guy that's more confident, but less willing to say it out loud at the minute.
That, for the first time in a while, feels a bit more tangible and logical. So
yeah. There's a logic to this that hasn't been there.
And he's got the team to himself, effectively, for the rest of the season as well. Even if Nicolo Bulliga does turn up, as is a potential possibility, I guess, for the final 2 races with Marc Marquez sidelined. We had a bit of a debate the other day. Val, who is only absent from this podcast due to catastrophic technical problems rather than anything more sinister than that. So to get this to you as quick as possible, we're carrying on without him. Val was a bit more skeptical about whether Marquez being absent and Bagnaia having the full focus would change much necessarily, given that directions to 2026 are reasonably set. Pecco himself has said when people have raised this to him, look at Motegi, everyone was focused on Marc winning the championship and I blew everyone away that weekend. It's not that people are paying me no attention. That's not the issue. But I just feel like psychologically, if nothing else, a long run without Marquez there gives Pecco a bit of a chance to just rebuild some relationships as much as anything else, just operate in a calmer way.
And actually, you know what? Bulliga coming in will probably aid that because it'll take a bit of the media focus away, but not take any of the technical focus away. No one's going to be coming to Bulliga to get his feedback on where the 26 bike is going to go yet. That he needs these races. This is the perfect time for him. If he's going to be their Pirelli test rider next year for 27, it's the perfect time for him to come in and do a couple of MotoGP races with the current bike to then see how it goes. The other thing that's just coming to my head, actually, that we didn't even mention as well, is that Bagnaia did the whole sprint race with no rear device, because it broke.
Oh, wow.
So there was even more speed there that we didn't see because he couldn't use it. So it was. I wrote a column, didn't I, on Saturday afternoon saying it was the most impressive performance of the season for me from him, and I stand by it, and especially with the ride height news.
Proves you don't need right height devices after all, doesn't it? Useful.
He admitted that he wouldn't have got away with that at most circuits. But it's Sepang you kind of can because there's not that much hard braking and kind of slow acceleration. There's just the 2 points, really.
Yeah. A quick chat about Alex Marquez, winner of the Grand Prix. This is where Val would be useful because Val got on a spectacular rant about the worthlessness of second in the championship and how the Marquez brothers have put way too much attention on wrapping up championship positions this year that were obvious from the first minute of race 1 onwards, Val listed when in our work chat, Val was listing things that Alex Marquez could afford to do and still be second in the championship. And I was like, I'm just going to read these out. And then as they got more and more ridiculous / unmentionable, I was like, I'm not going to read those out. So, but Val's opinion has been that the Marquez brothers have worried too much about the championship ceiling situation, both first and second, and could have got on with it a little bit more. And certainly the fact that Alex had the speed to win the Grand Prix, but didn't really go for it to that extent in the sprint while wrapping up the runner-up spot in the championship does fit Val's theory about worrying too much about the points. Where I disagree with Val, though, Simon, is that second the championship doesn't matter, because in this situation, perhaps uniquely, I really think it does, because what an achievement for the Marquez brothers to be brothers 1-2 in the championship. For that family with Marc currently sidelined, given how close those two are, even as siblings go, how much they've been in each other's careers, the emotional, if that was my kids being 1-2 in the MotoGP World Championship, I would be shouting from the rooftops about how big an achievement that was and different to your average second place clinching. How are your emotions?
I get it. I get what you're saying, and I see it, and I agree with it to an extent. But the problem is, for me, is that, Alex was joking tonight about first place or second place is first loser. And it just, once again, he's the loser to his brother. And it's the flip side of the sibling rivalry, isn't it? Of the fact that their sibling is the rivalry. It's like, congratulations, Alex, you're second best again. Which has kind of been the story of the poor guy's whole life. Alex Marquez would be a much more appreciated Grand Prix rider if he wasn't Marc's brother. If he wasn't Marc's brother, this would be celebrated so much more than it will be, because it would be such an awesome achievement for him, for Goscinny. But as it is, Marc is still somehow going to get most of the credit for what Alex has done. I feel sorry for Alex. I always do in these situations, bless him.
We spent Phillip Island declaring that Aprilia was better placed than ever to start toppling Ducati, that its form wasn't just one circuit specific, but had been such great momentum for so long that really we could properly, especially at this end of the season when Aprilia is normally falling apart and catching fire, properly count on Aprilia to be Ducati's big 2026 threat. Again, slightly overshadowed by Val's thoughts, even though he's not here. Val said, when we talk about when to run some website content about Aprilia, Val was like, well, I'd really like to see what happens at Sepang first, because that's going to reveal things properly. Simon, Aprilia's got to Sepang, and as Pecco's front feeling in the Race Members Club puts it, why was the Aprilia suddenly the worst bike after dominating Phillip Island? And it really was, wasn't it?
It's quite funny that Pecco's front feeling has turned up to ask something this weekend.
I mean, in fairness, Pecco's front feeling turns up every weekend to ask questions.
No, it doesn't. Pecco's lack of front feeling turns up every weekend to ask questions. I mean, high temperature, low grip, corner entry, corner exit. And the bike just didn't really work. I think there was a little bit of not inexperience with Aprilia. I don't think that's the right way to put it, but they didn't quite get it right. And then I think they did get it right, or they got closer to getting it right on Saturday.
Yeah.
Especially after the sprint. The sprint was okay. It was moving in the right direction. And I think there could have been a potential for a good result on Sunday for both Bezzecchi and Raul Fernandez if they had made a decent start and got into a good position and been able to chip away with it. But both of them went the wrong direction in the front tire. Both of them went to the medium when they should have went with the soft, and there was just nothing doing. It just didn't work for them. Ogura went with the soft front and was actually the one that was able to come through and end up top of Aprilia, which kind of highlights where it went wrong as Fernandez crashed out and as Bezzecchi kind of cruised around and said he joked afterwards that the only person he'd really been able to fight with was Brad Binder, and Binder beat him anyway, so it was all a bit pointless. So I think just a weekend to forget, one that proves that Aprilia are maybe still a little bit lacking in kind of data. Maybe they missed Jorge Martin this weekend to have another fast guy there to help build a bit of momentum over the course of the weekend. And just maybe like one where Aprilia are not necessarily used to operating at this level all the time.
Interesting.
They're not they're not a front running team all the time, and maybe that just contributed a little bit to the kind of the lack of, I don't know what way to put it, the kind of the lack of kind of unified thinking or whatever it needed to just click all the settings together and come out better than they did.
Yeah, Friday was bleak, and then qualifying just offered nothing really. There didn't look like at any point Bezzecchi was going to get through to Q2. And then the sprint seemed encouraging. The race pace was there. And once he made a bad start in the Grand Prix, but did start picking himself forward, I was thinking, well, he's going to get to the top 10 at least at the end. But like you say, it just didn't happen. The tyre choice seems to have nixed that. But it's not the kind of weekend Aprilia can afford if it's taking itself seriously as a Ducati beta going into 2026. You mentioned Iagura coming through. The one plus point from Aprilia's weekend, as Rana Byrne puts it, how is Agura sneakily the lead Aprilia at the end of the race? Is he back to full fitness? And like you say, tyre choice was right for Agura, but we haven't seen anything good from Agura since he had that horrible Misano crash that's affected him since, knocked him out of quite a few races since. Even before that, he was in quite a big mid-season slump and just seemed really lost for months. But turning up where he did at the end of this race, bottom of the top 10, ahead of Bezzecchi, is there a bit more than that?
I mean, worth remembering that this is somewhere that Agura has tested. He did 6 days of testing at the start of the year. And remember, we went to Thailand and tested for 2 days. He turned up to round one and he was like the Aprilia superstar. So I think he's talked about this at length, that he's a bit of a slow learner. And if you give him track time, he's quite good with it. And, he did his like usual Iagura debrief of just cooling everything down. By saying after the race that, this is pretty good and he was top Aprilia. It was nice to pass other bikes. He doesn't really care if they were other Aprilias or not. But the next circuit we're going to is Portimao, and it's going to be an absolute disaster because it's going to be a nightmare to learn in a MotoGP bike, which is his peak Agura. So I think, that we've got 2 races left. He hasn't raced at either of those circuits. I think he'll be quite tame for the rest of the year. But it bodes really well for next year, which is, fundamentally that's the thing we're looking at this point in the season, isn't it? With 2 races left in his rookie year, he's not going to be rookie of the year. There's nothing to win for it. So let's start looking at next year and what will come. And I think it's a good sign.
Yeah, and of course, normally at this point we'd be saying at least he knows Valencia on the MotoGP bike, but the test wasn't even there this year, last year rather. So that's another one for him to learn.
Barcelona specialist.
Yeah. Quick note on Pedro Acosta, who ended up second in the Grand Prix and had a really decent battle with Pecco Bagnaia along the way. First thing is we finished Phillip Island with Pedro Acosta saying, I cannot live with this KTM constantly eating tyres. Didn't seem to actually eat tyres today.
It kind of did in the sprint.
Yes.
And then they fixed it miraculously by, it's weird. All of the other KTMs kind of explained it better than Pedro and said that they'd all tried to fix it electronically and it wasn't really working. And I kind of get the impression that they'd been trying to fix it electronically for quite a while.
Yeah.
And like fiddling with engine braking and stuff like that to try and make the tires last a little bit better. And then I think Pedro may have lost his temper a little bit on Saturday and said, switch off all the electronics. I'll do it myself with my wrist. And all the others kind of went in the same direction and it worked. And there was like 3 KTMs in the top 10 at one point until Paul crashed.
Yeah.
It was a fairly decent day for them, and the tires lasted all the way to the line. He got lucky. He should have been third. If he would have been third if Bagnaia had not got a puncture. And I think if Joan Mir's first overtaken Fabio Quartararo had worked, he might have even been fourth. But that doesn't matter. It didn't, and he finished second. It's a good day, and it's kind of the day that Pedro Acosta. It's the day that KTM needed Pedro Acosta to have. I think it was another little reassuring pat in the back that actually this thing's getting better, and it's not all doom and gloom. And we did just to parse it very quickly, we did a one-on-one interview on Thursday, him and I.
Yeah.
And he told me this year had been a slap in the face for him, but it was kind of a slap in the face that he needed because it had helped mature him, and that he felt now they had a bike that can kind of semi-consistently win races next year and then hopefully fight for a title in 27. So he's kind of back on the KTM bandwagon, and results like this help.
There's so many times in the Race Members Club, people make comparisons between the Pedro KTM rants and Fabio Quartararo Yamaha rants. We'll get to Fabio a little bit later in this episode because it's an interesting weekend for him. But yeah, the situation around Pedro Acosta a bit calmer. I want to quickly, before we talk about Pedro's other interesting part of the weekend, Enea Bastianini, we've talked a little bit about whether his little breakthroughs that seem to happen are real or not. He was talking about engine braking making a difference for him in race trim. Terrible in practice and qualifying again, 19th on the grid, miserable about it all as well. And then get to a long race, and we've got Magic Bastianini tyre life wizardry back in, and he absolutely flies through the field. As a kind of someone who had a bit of faith in Bastianini in the past, I get a little bit tired of this. Can you just be quick for the whole weekend at some point?
He admitted on Sunday, his debrief on Sunday was during the press conference. So it was a bit hurried, and it was just him and I, and he kind of admitted that he'd been a bit of a miserable bugger on Friday, and it was maybe a bit undeserved from the team, and he was a bit grumpy. And then you know, like I think he made up. I think the first 3 laps, or the first 4 laps, the first 2 laps of the sprint, the first 2 laps of the Sunday's race, I think he made up like 18 positions. We came in to do the media debriefs on Saturday with Paul, and Paul, there was a printed copy of the race session guide, the PDF sitting on the table, and he flicked through the lap progression chart and looked at where Enea was at the end of lap 1, and then looked at where he was at the end of lap 2, and just went, holy f***, what did he do? I mean, I think it's kind of, they found a way to make the tires last, which suits him, and he's really, really good in the opening laps, and the bike is really, really quick off the line, and there's a very long run to the line here. I think probably up there with Barcelona in terms of the longest run from the grid spot to the turn 1 to breaking point. So those things combined means he was able to pull back what had been a pretty awful Friday and a pretty bang average qualifying. He's still struggling to get 1 lap out of it, but he can get 20 laps out of it.
Quite a pace from lap 12 of that 20 in particular, relative to everyone else, as usual for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Pedro Acosta's weekend also involved him getting €2,000 less rich when he became the first person to be punished for a new offence, which is the Alex Rins dodgy qualifying antics rule.
Yeah.
Essentially, riders, if they crash in the final, what is the time span that this applies to?
3 minutes.
3 minutes of a qualifying session, they are not allowed to try to remount. This comes from after Alex Rins seemed to take, well, not just quite a while rejoining when he crashed in the Mandalika qualifying. He was rejoining at a time we had no hope of setting another fast lap, but they kept the yellows out, and it potentially got him a row higher on the grid. Pedro Acosta had a late crash in Sepang qualifying, did rejoin, did continue, did go for another lap, even though it was within this time window. Got fined for it. His initial reaction was pretty unimpressed with that, but he chilled out by the time he was actually officially speaking to you, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, so whenever he first turned up, in the media center, at the desks behind me there, he turned up, and Brad Binder and Brad Binder and Miguel Oliveira were waiting to do their media debriefs, and he'd obviously just come from the steward's office, and he was on his way to do his TV media before he did his print media, and was outrageous, was kind of gesticulating wildly about these have bankrupted me. And Brad was like, calm down, they take it out of your salary, you don't even notice that it goes. The voice of reason here. And he was pretty unhappy about it. But then, by the time he spoke to us, he was a bit more calm about it. His main gripe was that whether or not he was actually trying to rejoin, the marshals pushed him. So his opinion was basically that he was pushed into rejoining, and it wasn't his fault. It was a bit of a messy first implementation of the rule.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see it like tidied up over the next few weeks with a bit more clarity about what actually it means, and what counts as a crash and what counts as a rejoin, and things like that, as the stewards kind of spend a bit more time thinking about it. It was obviously brought in as a bit of a Rins stopgap, because what Alex did was really cheeky. And I think it was probably more focused at people trying to rejoin and not actually rejoining. than people
Yeah.
in the Acosta situation of just rejoining and buggering off from the corner where you'd crashed. So I think we'll see it kind of tinkered with over the next few weeks. The kind of the exact wording and implementation of that.
Yeah, I loved it that Acosta also basically said when you've just crashed, you're not looking for a clock on your dashboard to work out like if you're
Yeah.
allowed to rejoin or not. You're just trying to get the bike back up again. I'm having rewatched it. I think he was trying pretty hard to get the bike back up again. That wasn't just Marshall's going, no, please
Yeah,
go, go, go.
yeah,
Well, he was trying to
exactly.
go
Yeah,
home. There was,
yeah,
he was a bit complicit in that. We had the Fermin Alga situation as well, where it looked like Aldiger might be trying to accidentally not break that rule, but it looked like maybe he was just trying to get his bike started to get back to an
yeah.
escape road to get back to the paddock, and then crashed into his own garage when he got there, which was
Yeah, nearly
different.
killed Michele Massini, the team boss, who was just happened to be outside the garage at the time. Way to got him. I think that actually the one thing that we've seen that we probably do need another rule for, because we've seen it already this year with Acosta, is to ban the actual riding of bikes in the paddock,
Yeah.
because that could have been quite nasty. And you remember Acosta came charging through the pits in Austria and literally rode the bike between the trucks and into the back of the pit
Yeah.
box at fairly high speed. And considering they're not allowed, considering only MotoGP riders and no one else in the entire paddock are allowed to ride scooters in the paddock at any time during the day, riding a MotoGP bike probably isn't the best thing. I think when Acosta did it, he wasn't even, the bike was out of fuel, so it was silent as well.
Oosh.
He was freewheeling it downhill at the time. So I can see a change coming there.
On Saturday, both Hondas crashed, which was the first time all season for Luca Marini and the 800th billionth time for Sharon Mir. On Sunday, Mir got another podium, and there's a lot of Honda enthusiasm in the race members club. Storm Martin, or possibly Storm Martin, or Storm A Martin, let us know, says, I'm starting to believe the Honda is the third best bike consistently. Although I've been a bit grumpy about Honda for about the last 5 years, I can see that logic. This is the lack of staying upright from Mir at times is obscuring us a bit, but it's been a while since Honda has looked really troubled. Mir's reasons for crashing have become a bit different, and it's just turning up pretty quick, pretty much everywhere. Joan Zarco was quick again this weekend. Seems like he's getting his head around the upgrades as well.
Yeah,
Honda now clear number 3?
I think so. Starting to look that way, or at least alternating week by week with KTM, depending on what spec of bike they turn up with. But definitely in contention for that spot. Mere so Peter Clifford, the guy who Peter used to run Red Bull Yamaha many years ago, and then WCM Yamaha back in the first days of the four-stroke MotoGP class, and now runs Red Bull rookies. Replied to my tweet about Mir crashing out on Sunday to say that the most dangerous thing in the world is a bike that's almost good enough. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of that's the nail on the head for why Mir is crashing so much at the minute, because the bike is almost good enough to win races, and he's just overriding it trying to get there, because he's hasn't won anything since. I mean, the last day he won a race was the day he won his world championship.
Yeah. No, true,
Yeah,
because his good 2021 season wasn't, was
wasn't race
winless,
winning.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a long time. And I think that I think there's just a bit of urgency in everything he does, and we're seeing the same thing from Zarco, who has like 50% more crashes than Mir, even though Mir
Yeah.
has 800 billion. Zarco is like, I think they're on 20 and 29, something like
Yeah.
that at the minute.
Honda
So
Championship
he's
1-2 there.
yeah, exactly. No, there's someone in between them in the
Oh,
championship
there is,
standings.
isn't there?
Alex Marquez, maybe.
You continue with your point while I look back to where you told me this
Someone's in between
yesterday.
them. They're not a clear 1 or 2. But I mean, it's Luca Marini isn't crashing because he's Luca Marini and he just doesn't get excited enough to crash. And that's taking nothing away from Luca, who's doing an exceptional job this year as well. But I think like Honda have the right package of riders right now to deliver on this bike that is starting to get better. And I mean, even Chantra is slowly becoming a consistent point scorer
Yeah.
for the first time this season. So it's all looking pretty rosy at Honda. And just to throw in an absolute bombshell because it's late at night, but why not? I spoke to someone at the weekend who's closely affiliated with Marc Marquez at times, and I kind of said, I've had this bit of a suspicion for a while that Marc might find his way back to Honda in 2027. And they went, oh, so it's not just me that thinks that way. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we've said it for a long time. It was amusing how when they first split, we just kept talking incessantly about how romantically they'd come back together. This was a temporary detour while Honda sorted itself out. And then there was a period where Honda was showing so little signs of progress that you just thought, okay, we actually joked about how stupid we were to suspect this. And now with Honda looking good, Marquez is ticking the championships off with Ducati. That storyline is looming over the horizon, I would say. Check the crash stats. I've just looked at the rough notes from yesterday, so we need to update them fully with the weekend. But actually, Mir is in a similar crash position to Alex Marquez and Frankie Morbidelli. And poor Jack Miller, bless him, is ahead of all of those, second in the championship to Zarco.
I actually have the updated report with all the total numbers on it sitting here. Of course I do. Pedro Acosta, 20.
Yeah.
Marco Bezzecchi, 18. Alex Marquez, 22. Jack Miller, 24. Joan Mir, 21. Franco Morbidelli, 20. Johan Zarco, 28.
Pretty competitive.
Yeah.
One of the people Mir was looking urgent with today, and I love the urgency point is very true. I was more cross with him for crashing when there was nothing to fight for. Now I do kind of get it. He put some great moves on Fabio Quartararo in their battle, and it was kind of like, I'm going to slide really wide, but I've just got to go for it stuff.
We asked Fabio, someone asked Fabio about, did he enjoy the battle with Mir? And he kind of went, I wasn't battling with Mir, I was defending against Mir.
Yeah.
Which,
it was right from the start of the weekend, Fabio was in warning for the future mode. Basically, when the Yamaha V4 was back, Augusto Fernandez warned straight away, you're not going to see a lot from it this weekend. We're running a detuned engine spec at the behest of the bosses in Japan. This circuit's got some massive straights. I'm just here to get data, just see if the feeling's improving. I'm optimistic. Alex Rins, Jack Miller, they're optimistic as well. Quartararo was like, I need this bike to be this good by next February Sepang test. And he was questioned by a few people, and that's quite a high expectation. And he was very much flat out going, that's my expectation. So back to where we were a couple of years ago, we've got Quartararo impatient. Understandably, he's a champion who's not had a chance to win anything, still smashing out amazing qualifying performances, then inevitably going backwards in the race. How do you think Fabio ends this weekend? Because it's a very, very muted one from the V4.
I think Fabio is a complete doom and gloom merchant. Because it's very much worth noting that whenever he said all those things the last time, he then immediately re-signed for Yamaha, a bike that hasn't got much better since. and I think the V4 has got potential. I think there is stuff coming. Augusto was pretty muted all weekend. He was pretty muted when we spoke to him after the race, but he was more happy than he had been all weekend after the race, because he said that they turned up at Misano with a load of problems. And over the course of the weekend, they fixed them. And that was good. And they left pretty competent. Then they turned up here and they had a load of the same problems. And it made the weekend really difficult. But they felt like by Sunday afternoon, they'd fixed them again. And that, to me, is just the baby steps of a new bike.
Yeah.
That's just what the process is going to be. That's how it works. And, that's going to have to be how it is. And that's a message not just for Augusto, but for Fabio, that this thing is not going to revolutionize the world overnight. The more concerning thing that Augusto did say is that he said that they need new stuff. They need new bits for the bike. He's going to test in Portimao while we're in Aragon with Toprak, the Toprak Repsol Belglue, who's making his debut on this bike in a private test. Then they're going to come to Valencia, and the bike that he's going to wildcard on in Valencia is going to be the newer V4. That's going to be the first evolution of this bike, and that then is the bike that the racers are going to test on after Valencia. His concern was whether or not they have enough time and resource to then bring a version 3 back to Sepang in February that is going to make Fabio Quartararo happy or not. That's the bit that he admits he doesn't know the answer to right now. And that, I think I don't think that will be the decider because Fabio's not going to decide his future after Sepang. But the bike that's homologated in Thailand for the first race is going to be the bike that decides Fabio Quartararo's future, and we need to see what Yamaha can do between now and then, essentially.
Yeah, Paul McClanahan in the Race Members Club asks, at what point does Fabio say the goodwill is done? Now, he's been paid... Well, I was going to say, he's been paid quite well. We talked about how a good pay rise from Yamaha kept him there. He has given some interviews
you watched
recently.
This weekend.
Yes, yeah. He's given some interviews saying, actually, my pay rise wasn't that big, but you've been watching his wrist, and you think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But goodwill-wise, regardless of the pay, he could get paid well elsewhere as well. He is still a recent world champion. He's loyal to Yamaha up to a point.
The biggest problem that Yamaha have right now is that there's one factory that can pay as well as them, and Honda. It's the one we've just been talking about, having a really good bike now, and that's kind of the thing. And actually, Yamaha have shot themselves in the foot to an extent, because any potential transition for Fabio away from Yamaha is going to be made a lot easier by spending 2026 riding any V4, even if it's not very good. So they've kind of shot themselves in the foot to an extent with that, maybe. I don't know. But my gut feeling is the decision for Fabio will come after probably Jerez and the Monday test in May.
Yeah, I can see that.
Traditional test, that will be the date. And the thing is, everyone will wait for Fabio.
Well, it depends if Marc's moving back to Honda or not as well, because that will...
that's the only condition. But if Marc moves back to Honda, there's a factory Ducati seat.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that will be... And Marc and Fabio will be the two linchpin pieces of the 2027 puzzle board. They will be the movers, because everything else will depend on them. I think Jorge Martin's future depends on them because his stock has diminished. Joan Mir's future depends on them. I'm looking at the other world champions in the grid.
Yeah.
It all depends on those two.
Pecco
Bagnaia's. I think Pecco Bagnaia will remain at Ducati as long as no one else is absolutely chomping at the bit, and that also depends on what Marc does. So yeah, I think if they lose Marc, they'll keep Pecco.
Yeah, I can see that.
So there's a lot of questions there.
When you talked about the Sepang test being the crucial one, I would go with your logic of Jerez, because as much as we always talk about MotoGP deals being done very early traditionally, I think it's a totally different situation when you've got the big 2027 rule change. Riders have to give it a bit longer. They're not going to see the 2027 bikes and judge them properly from how they actually are, but they need a bit more time to get the whispers and get a vibe.
Another thing that's going to be really important in figuring out the contracts, and we don't know this yet, is when the racers get the first chance to try the Pirellis.
Yes, true.
Which might be around the time of that Jerez test. I wouldn't be surprised next year if we end up doing some of the Monday tests becoming Monday, Tuesday tests, where the day 2 is on Pirelli.
Yeah,
that will be informative as well.
Yeah. We'll leave it there for Sepang. If you're in the Race Members Club, you will have listened to Sepang 2015 this week. Of some clips from that and our Phillip Island 2015 chat are out on our Race Moto YouTube channel. You can get them in the free feed of the main Race MotoGP podcast during this week as well. But for the full series, for the full episode, I'm actually really proud of the Sepang one. It was a wild ride, but surprisingly enjoyable to revisit given how angsty all of that weekend was. That is available in the Race Members Club in full now. We'll be back in the week leading into Portimao for the final doubleheader. But like we said at the outset, we're leaving this one really not thinking about anything other than the families and condition of Noah Dettwiler and Jose Antonio Rueda after a really tough day for the MotoGP paddock.